Hi everyone, this is Counseling 4500, Chapter 4, Psychoanalytic Therapy, Part 3. Alright, now let's talk about the applications, the therapeutic techniques, and procedures. So it's about increasing awareness, remember, bringing the unconscious to the conscious, fostering insight into behavior, so understanding why you behave the way that you're behaving, understanding the meanings of symptoms, going from talk to catharsis. Catharsis is just a fancy word for oh or aha. It's kind of like that moment of realization, right? Or the moment of insight for a person. So going from talk, which is just talking about what's going on in your life, to that, oh, this is the reason why this is happening, right? Or whatever it is. Insight, and then working through unconscious materials as well. So in this section, we're going to talk about the 6 basic techniques when it comes to psychodynamic therapy. Number 1 is maintaining the analytic framework. Number 2 is free association. Number 3 is interpretation. Number 4 is dream analysis. Number 5 is analysis of resistance. And number 6 is analysis of transference. So let's go through each of these. All right, maintaining the analytic framework. So to start off, we're going to talk a little bit about the therapist's, prep work here. You're going to be relatively anonymous. Remember that blank screen approach that we talked about before. You're going to also maintain neutrality, so you're not going to side with one person or the other, your clients or the other people that they talk about. And then be objective, which is saying, what you see. It's not necessarily just an opinion, but from things that you actually see or observe or listen to. Regularity and consistency of meetings, starting and ending the session on time, clarity on the fees, and then basic boundary issues. So these are actually typical things that happen a lot with most of your clients when you do therapy. Okay, kind of informed consent to a certain extent. All right, the first technique that we're going to talk about is free association. Encourage to say whatever comes to mind, regardless of how painful, silly, trivial, illogical, or irrelevant it may seem. So you might have wordplay where the person will say one word, whatever it is, and then now we're going to think of the next word and stuff like that. Very kind of, off the cuff, not pre-planned or anything like that. It's a tool used to open the doors to the unconscious wishes, fantasies, conflicts, and motivations. A therapist's job is to identify and the repressed material that is locked into the unconscious. So as a therapist, you're not just like listening to the words and go, oh, that's really nice. No, you're actually taking notes and you're seeing if there's any patterns in all of this kind of free association where it's like unplanned, but do you still see certain things emerging? All right, nothing the client says should be taken just at face value. Look into the hidden meaning or looking for the hidden meanings. And we talked a little bit about Freudian slips or slips of the tongue. Please feel free to watch this video. It's the one about the cooking channel and the cooking competition where someone makes a pea salad. Interpretation. Analysts pointing out, explaining, and teaching the client the meanings of the behaviors that are manifested in their dreams, in their free association, maybe the resistances, the things that they don't want to talk about, and then also the therapeutic relationship itself. We're talking about trying to understand your client's personality and also the client's past and how it contributes to what is going on with their lives right now. Maybe it's how, things that have that occurred when they were a child that is preventing them from doing the things that they're doing or their barriers. The therapist gauge client's reaction for readiness to make interpretations. So as you're working with your client, you need to make sure that they're ready for it. You do not want to overwhelm your client because they could stop going to you, right? Or scare them and stuff like that. So you need to really understand who they are, read their body language. Are they comfortable? Or are they going to tense up? Are they going to be defensive when you say certain things? So you need to be aware of those things and be very respectful that way. When the interpretation is close to the client's conscious awareness, this is when you may bring it up, and start with the surface and then go deeper as your client can handle. So you might start off with saying, hey, there are certain things that, we both can see when you're talking. And then as you get a feel for them, are they open to like maybe understanding a little bit more? Then you can start to get a little bit deeper. The next one is dream analysis, uncovering unconscious materials for insight. It's also known as the royal road to the unconscious. And that makes sense, right? You're dreaming, so your fantasies are all over the place potentially. So we are trying to, now that you're telling us your dreams, or sharing your dreams with us, we're going to potentially go, oh, maybe this is what it means, right? For some motivations, they're also so unacceptable that a person may express them in symbols instead of directly. So maybe there's something really guilty, something that's making them feel really guilty in their lives, and they cannot deal with it. They're so embarrassed, they're secret, they're keeping it a secret and all that stuff. And so then it might come out in a dream of some sort. And in dreams, there are two levels, the latent content and then the manifest content. And we're going to explain that in the next slide. Okay, latent content is the hidden symbolic and unconscious motives, wishes, and fears. Some are so painful and threatening, the unconscious sexual and aggressive impulses that make up latent content are transformed into manifest content. So latent content is kind of like the real deal. What is wrong with us, or what are we hiding in our unconsciousness, right? Manifest content, on the other hand, is how it looks to you in the dream. Okay, so maybe it is something where you're dreaming that you're in the bathroom and then your teeth fall out while you're looking at the mirror, right? So that's your manifest. Your latent content, that might be you're losing your teeth because maybe in certain people's dreams, teeth represent wealth or money. So it's really about losing money on a crypto investment that you did or something like that, right? And so you can see the difference between latent, which is like the fear of the actual things that are going on, whereas the manifest is what it looks like in your dreams. The process from latent to manifest is called dream work. So when you're doing this type of dream work analysis, it's just called dream work itself. The therapist will ask the client to free associate. Again, talk just, whatever dreams or whatever you want to talk about in that sense. The therapist will explore the dreams of the client and unlock the repressed issues that contribute to the present problem. So oftentimes people will talk about dreams of falling or dreams of going through tunnels. And oftentimes when people say that they're dreaming about tunnels, a lot of people would interpret it as a very sexual dream. So what's that going on right there? All right, analysis and interpretation of resistance. So then this is refusing to say something or talk about something. Reluctance to bring to the surface of awareness unconscious materials that has been repressed. So it's so stressful in your life that you put it to the side because you don't want to think about it, right? Repression, remember, that's one of the ego defense mechanisms. Used by the client to defend against anxiety and pain that can appear with awareness. Resistance is designed to protect the person. So again, ego defense mechanisms are totally fine. We use it all the time. But what we don't want is for us to use it for everything for the entire life and not deal with reality, right? You got to deal with life. Life keeps on going. Clients may wish to stay the same and change at the same time. Yeah, there's an urge like, I need to go forward, but something's keeping me back. Safe environment is stressed to the client to reduce that resistance. So by typically in a counseling session or a counseling office, you're supposed to create like a place of safety for them, or at least they feel safe to experience or to experiment or to revisit traumatic events, right? And then from there, then hopefully then they can work on it and then move forward from there. All right, analysis and interpretations of transference. Remember we talked about transference is when your client treats you in a certain way because they might be treating you like how they treat someone in their actual real lives. Transference is valuable because it provides the client an opportunity to re-experience a variety of feelings that would otherwise be repressed. So again, in Freudian or psychoanalytic or psychodynamic theory, we like transference. That's fine. Clients can recognize how they are repeating the same patterns in their relationships with people in their present lives. So it might be like, why am I with an abusive person all the time? Like, how come every partner I'm dating kind of abuses me in different ways? So that might be that cathartic moment, like that, oh, maybe this is why this is happening to me. Now let's talk about Freud application to group counseling. There are useful tools in counseling, which is transference. So when you have group therapy, like let's say about 8 people in a group, transference happens because one of your clients might see their cohort member A reminds them of their brother. Cohort B reminds them of their best friend. Cohort C person might be like their parent, right? So they're actually now, you can observe how they treat everyone is how they might probably treat someone in their own lives as well. Countertransference can happen in that period with each other. Resistance, ego defense mechanisms to reduce anxiety. Again, all these things, we get to witness it happening within a group of people. The group setting, the attractions, the anger, the competition, the avoidance with transference and countertransference. We'll get to see all of those things happening with each of your members. Each member could also remind them of different family members and the therapist as a parental figure, like I just said a little bit ago. Okay, now let's talk about another really famous disciple of Freud. His name is Jung. Okay, Jung's perspective on development of personality. So he was one of Freud's main students. However, he did suggest some different things, and then Freud goes, "I don't like you anymore. You're disowned. You're no longer, one of my people." Because Freud really believed that everything that he said was true and accurate and right. And if you dare to challenge it, he will disown you. So Jung is one of those famous disowned people. So he really talks about analytical psychology, the explanation of the human that combines ideas of history, mythology, anthropology, and religion. So he's really well known for talking about this. He wrote a book called The Red Book that a lot of people love. Okay. So let's just talk about the overall things about him. He's not necessarily a major component when it comes to therapy, but he plays a really big role because he also does talk about behaviors and stuff like that. All right. Central importance on the psychological changes that are associated with midlife. We need to let go of the values and behaviors that guided the first half of our life and confront our unconsciousness. So what happens is, halfway through, you might be experiencing some of these emotions and stuff. Let go of your history and then move forward with what's going on now. So basically, again, deal with your consciousness and unconsciousness. All right, pay attention to our dreams, engaging in creative activities such as writing and painting, and then give into our unconscious forces and integrate them into our conscious life. He is very spiritual. He loves art. He believes that, all these things, these symbols, these signs, all could potentially be connected, but not just by each individual person, but as a human species itself, together. We have this, emanatingness. If you ever saw, or did you all see Avatar, the movie with the blue things, the blue people or whatever? You know how they're all kind of together and connected with each other, very much Jungian in that way. Okay. Jung based his framework on his own life. Jung could not support Freud's theory of sexuality, so he disagreed with that. Focused on the spiritual and a spiritual approach to find the meaning in life. So instead of Freud's psychological and biological forces, he's looking for a more spiritual approach to the meaning of life. We are not merely shaped by our past events, but we are influenced by our future as well as our past. So that's very different. Remember, Freud is very determined, right? Deterministic in his views on psychology and the human person. Human nature is constantly developing, growing, and moving towards a balance and complete level of development. So he's also very yin and yang. I don't know if you know that sign, but we'll see in the next slide where it's very much like a balance of the two. So personality is who and what we have been, as well as what we aspire to be in the future. So again, that balance of past and present and future and stuff like that. Humans tend to move towards their fulfillment of all of their capabilities. So he is also saying we want to be the best that we can be as we age and move forward. Individuation is another term that he uses. It's a harmonious integration of the conscious and unconscious aspects of personality. So our goal is to find that balance, that yin and yang, as you can see in the sign right here. We have both a constructive, but we are also destructive inner forces. It is essential to accept our dark side, which is also known as the shadow, the greed, and the selfishness. That means that we also recognize that we have a dark side, but not necessarily to be dominated by this. So now you're starting to hear about the dark side. Doesn't that sound a lot like Star Wars? So what you need to realize is Star Wars is really heavily influenced by Jung and having this come to the light, right? And these dark sides and this destructive force and then the constructive forces and stuff like that. So Star Wars, not that original when you think about all the influences that happen to create what that show is or that movie or that, adventure is. There's also the collective unconscious. So that's the deepest aspects of the psyche, containing the accumulation of inherited experiences of the human and pre-human species. So now we're talking about evolution, and obviously we're not talking about religion or anything like that in that sense. So if you do not believe in evolution, that's fine, but we're going to talk about it because this person does, right? So what is going on here is he's talking about the fact that he believes that we're all born sharing common urges and needs and stuff like that. And so how is that happening? Why is it happening? Where is it taking us? What is the big picture of that? So some dreams may deal with the individual's relationships to a larger whole, such as a family or the universe of humanity, or even generations over time. So he's kind of very spiritual, very kind of, taking LSD-ish type, or something like that. So it's something that you want to think about when it comes to whoa, what's the bigger picture? And that brings us to archetypes. Archetypes are images of universal experiences contained in collective unconscious. So there's persona, there's anima and animus, and then there's shadow. So here's something that you want to see is these characters that if you watch any movie or book, usually there's one leading character that represents something right here. But I'll give you an example, okay? If there is a little kid, right, and he's lost, he's going to look at people to see who is going to remind him of his mother, let's say. And then he'll come to you, let's say that you're that person, and holds you and hugs you or hugs your leg, right? And then suddenly you're like, oh, this child, let me now be a parental figure to it because that looks so sad and it looks like it needs help. And then suddenly, even though you are not their mother, you're holding it and him, let's say him, right? Hugging him and then comforting him. So suddenly you became this archetype of a mother figure, right? So that's what it's talking about. It's this urge, from push and pull, that people go, we need a hero at this time. And suddenly you're like, I'm that hero in a movie, right? And then now that person has become this brave person because they're trying to represent this idea of a hero or this character. Or a jester, someone who jokes around a lot because we're so sad right now. We need someone to lighten up, and they look at you, and then you're like, okay, I'm gonna try and do something that's funny and kind of find that calmness. All right, persona. These are some of the words that we saw in the previous slide. Persona is the mask, the public face that we wear to protect ourselves. Okay, so persona is kind of who we want other people to see. Animus and anima are the biological and psychological aspects of masculinity and femininity. And believe it or not, humans, men and women, you kind of have a little bit of both, right? Your ranges might be a little bit different, but we all have both. Men have testosterone, but women do too, right? Men have estrogen and women do too, but they're different levels, and we need to think about that. I think in social media, we hear a lot about a man, is an alpha, whatever, no feelings of femininity or anything like that. But the reality of us as humans is that we're kind of a range of both. So that's what that's talking about. Shadow is the deepest roots in the most dangerous and powerful of the archetypes. It's kind of like our dark side because we all kind of do have a dark side. Have we all not thought of dark things or negative things, right? We do. But we also need to remember that we don't want that to take over our thinking and our lives, but to, see the light side, the good side, the bright side, right? So On our dark side, the thoughts, feelings, and actions that we tend to disown by projecting them outwards. Two purposes of dreams is to be perspective, which is help people prepare themselves for everyday events that anticipate in the future. So when you have dreams, it might be just a dream because you're stressed out about something that's happening, which is, let's say, for example, you have a test that you're going to dream about taking a test, right? We're not necessarily thinking about that per se when it comes to our dream work that comes along with Freud. There's also compensatory function, which is working to bring out a balance between opposites within a person in that dream. So again, that means that we're trying to figure out how to resolve what's going on with ourselves through the dream analysis. All right, contemporary trends, object relations theory, self-psychology, and relational analysis. So these are other Freudians or his students. So they're known as the Neo-Freudians. So we're going to really just quickly introduce you to all these different ones. But Freud, now you're kind of getting like, an overall understanding of who Freud is, right? And his theories. All right, ego psychology is the emphasis on the id, the ego, and superego by Anna Freud's defense mechanisms. Anna Freud adapted psychoanalysis to children and adolescents. So she's focusing on those populations. There's object relations theory, is how our relationships with other people are affected by the way that we have internalized our experiences of others and set up representations of others within ourselves. So in that sense, it's, we have developed certain types of relationships with certain people already, and then we apply it to other people, and we look at them as specific types of people that serve a specific purpose. All right, self-psychology, how we use interpersonal relationships. Interpersonal is just a fancy word for communications with other people. So how we communicate relationships or with relationships, self-objects, and to develop our own sense of self. So how do we see who we are as a human being? All right. Relational model is therapy is an interactive process between a client and a therapist. So the relationship part, right? Relating to each other. Therapist is no longer the power figure over the client, but we're working together as a team. All right, summary stages of development. So for object relations theory that we just talked about a little bit, Margaret Mahler is the famous person. She was a pediatrician. She challenges the phallic stage that we were talking about. Again, women do not like Freud. If you talk to most people right now, women think Freud is very sexist or very misogynistic, which means anti-woman. Okay? Focusing on the first 3 years of life, she talks about normal infantile autism, which is the first 3 weeks of life, responding more to states of physiological tension than psychological tension. So you're reacting to physical stuff as opposed to mental stuff. Object relations, breasts, hands, face, and mouth, no self. Symbiosis is 3rd to 8th month, which is pronounced dependency on the mother. So really depending on the mother to help them. And that's what happens, right? Basically. All right. Separation, individuation is the 4th to 5th month. Experiences separation from significant others, yet still turn to them for a sense of comfort. So we start to learn how to go away from others, but at the same time, we need them when we really need them, right? So we still call out for them. Children who do not experience the opportunity to differentiate or can idealize others as well as have a sense of pride can develop a narcissistic characteristic. So to be able to understand how children develop, how they treat other people can also develop and affect their narcissistic, or they think of themselves very highly as opposed to other people. So you need to be able to differentiate. All right. Narcissistic personality is grandiose and exaggerated sense of self-importance or worth, and an exploitative attitude towards others, masking a frail self-concept. So what that is saying is that as a narcissistic personality is that you think you're really good and everything like that. But really, if you think about the unconscious component in Freud, it's probably because you feel really small or very insignificant, but you cannot handle that. You cannot deal with it. So you become this very I'm the best at everything. All right, borderline personality disorder. Crisis ensues when the child does develop beyond the stage of symbiosis, but the parents are unable to tolerate this beginning to individuation and withdraw emotional support. So what happens here is, the child is learning to become an adult, basically, or a child growing up, right? But sometimes parents don't or cannot, are not able to handle that. So they might trip up the child in a way so the child becomes more dependent on the parent. So that's what it's talking about, is developing these disorders because of how the parents treat the child, right? Lack of a clear identity, a lack of deep understanding of other people, poor impulsive control, and the inability to tolerate anxiety. Separation, individuation, move towards constancy of self and object, 3 years old. Children can relate without being overwhelmed with fears of losing sense of individuality. So now they're starting to understand who they are. They're not feeling overwhelmed. They're not going to necessarily use all those defense mechanisms in an unhealthy way. All right, there's also a brief psychodynamic therapy. So this is like more modern as well. It applies the principles of psychodynamic theory and therapy into 10 to 25 sessions. Remember, originally it's a long-term therapy for like your entire life. So now we're going down to a smaller amount, and part of that is because of insurance paying for it, right? Okay, enduring impact of psychosexual. So we examine those. We talk about the psychosocial components, object relation stages of development, maybe. And then existence of unconscious process and the resistance. Those are the techniques that we're talking about, that we're looking for. Usefulness of interpretation, importance of the working alliance between the therapist and the client, reenactment of the client's past emotional issues in relations to the therapist. So now, again, they're reenacting or bringing up these things, these ideas to talk about. Not for people with severe characterological disorders, or severe depression. So here is what it is saying here. If you have a severe mental health issue, Freud is not the one for you for therapy, okay? Or if you have severe depression, this is not the therapy for you, okay? Psychoanalytic therapy from a multicultural perspective. The strength is Erickson's psychosocial approach is applicable to people of color. So that's one thing, is if you mix and use Erickson, who is inspired and influenced by Freud, that makes a lot more sense than the oral, anal, and phallic stages, right? Because other cultures might not necessarily believe in those things, because some cultures do not breastfeed, or it is very acceptable not to breastfeed. So then what happens there? Are you saying that they're all bad? That doesn't make sense. Okay, shortcomings when it comes to Freudian or psychodynamic or psychoanalytic theory is it's expensive. It's costly, based on the upper and middle class values. Again, remember, Freud was dealing with wealthy people, usually middle class and wealthy people who are also European. Okay, so those things could be very bad. But remember, we can also apply these things into a multicultural framework today with the contemporary psychodynamics. Some cultures do not like an unstructured approach. Like if you think about some cultures, you're like, oh yeah, just tell me about anything about what's going on in your life. They're like, what? I don't know what to talk about here. Or tell me about your dreams. And they're like, I don't want to talk about my dreams. So that could be potentially a shortcoming to it. And then limitations and criticisms of psychoanalytic approach is that critics say that they ignore empirical research. And part of that is because it's one of the first ones. There were not as much research done, but there's now tons of research done on it. But I will say that the other therapies have even more research done on it. So that's why when you compare it, yes, this one doesn't have as much. Time, expense, availability of trained psychoanalytic therapists, extensive analysis of transference. Again, it's a lot of training to be a Freudian therapist. Most of us are not. So that's something that you should be aware of when it comes to doing your future papers and your techniques. Most of us do not use or identify as a Freudian therapist, although you might use some of his techniques or his beliefs, but that is because he started it all. Anonymity is not a good model for effective therapy. So contemporary times now, the therapist does talk to the client and relate to them and kind of be their guide, right? Or their person who's going to go on this journey of change and discovery. So you're talking to them. It's not as anonymous as it was back then, where you're sitting and you're looking away and not looking at his face and all that other stuff. Feminist framework says that the relationship between the mother and the child is overemphasized in determining the future functionings, so that mothers are always blamed while the father is absent. So I guess the father doesn't get any blame, but really, if you're absent, maybe that's something that is also an issue as well, right? And of course, does not relate to contemporary culture. So again, Freud is, I believe, over 100 years now. It's not the same as it is today in 2024. So it's not going to be the same. People don't see the world the same way it has before. But the contemporary version does change those things. But right here, we're talking about is just like, his classic psychoanalysis. All right, this is the end of chapter 4. Thank you. Bye.